Live from Sarasota, Florida, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We've got a brand new episode for our Career Library Edition. Again, we're creating a library across North America with careers from anything from an anthropologist to a zoologist. They'll be there. You can listen to these interviews, become more informed on different career pathways. Two ways you can join the show. We are streaming via YouTube Live. If you have any questions for me and my guests, please enter them into the comments section. Also, Zach at zachballinger.com. You can ask questions throughout email across the show, and we appreciate you joining. Adam, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
So, Adam, you have a pretty unique and interesting career. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yes. So my career is in many ways, I am a professional endurance athlete. So I've qualified for the Olympic marathon trials and compete nationally in endurance focused events, specifically related to running.
Wow. So, so they call it an endurance athlete, I guess, correct?
That is correct. Yes, exactly. That kind of goes across sports, though. So an endurance athlete could refer to someone who's a cyclist, a triathlete, a runner. But broadly speaking, I'm in the marathon realm of the endurance athlete world.
How did you get into this?
So I've been running for a long time. I ran actually starting when I was in high school and ended up being mildly successful, but I ended up just walking on to a G3 college. I was mostly focused on academics, but still wanted to run as it was one of my pastimes and something I was passionate about. But throughout college, it improved and ended up making some big strides. And after that, actually spent some time in graduate school in Salt Lake City, where I linked up with a training group for people specifically focused on basically half marathon distances and longer. And at that point, I improved even more beyond what I had even envisioned I could possibly do. And then ultimately qualified for the Olympic marathon trials. And then after that, spent a little bit of time alone training in the desert in Tucson. But after that, I actually recently moved to San Diego and am now running with the San Diego Track Club elite team out here in California.
Wow, that's awesome. And so, you have this kind of the outside of the box career. Not many people can say, because I can barely run 3 miles. And so, not many people can do this type of career. How did your parents and relatives react to, hey, guys, I'm going to be a endurance athlete person?
They're really supportive, albeit a little bit confused. My dad's built like a human refrigerator and was an all-state athlete in like power sports. So he's like an offensive tackle, shot putter, DH in baseball type guy. And that's my brother's physique as well. That's what a lot of my family's built like. So to have someone who's, 6'1", like 145 soaking wet, they were really confused, but I do come from a fairly athletic family. So I think that, they understand what it's like to be an athlete, although they don't personally compete in these types of events themselves. But no, they're my biggest fans and are extremely supportive. So I couldn't ask for more on that front. And they also have done their best, absolutely, to understand running and training and what it entails. My dad even may one day actually become a cross-country coach in his retirement, just because he's actually developed a passion through the sport through watching me run myself. So, they're definitely supportive, although just, a bit confused as to how I at least physiologically turned out like this compared to them.
Adam, what do you love about your job? What are you passionate about? What kind of gets you going?
I would say I love a lot of things, but I think the things that I love are that it's absurd to think about it. It's like I have the chance to do something that people do as kids and who they don't think it's a real career, where it's something that is actually possible. I think also the meditativeness that I could get through running while working through my problems if I'm running alone, enjoying time in nature, that solo aspect of centering and balancing myself is really helpful. But then also the really great community around running and being able to like make friends and be a part of that greater network of people who understand what you're doing and are also passionate about the same thing as you is also fantastic. I would say that in my career, I always want to make sure that I'm developing intellectually, physically, and creatively. And obviously running does the physical element, but when I'm running, I can think and be, creative, and think about things that I've learned throughout the day and try and develop mentally as well if I'm running on my own and not running with a group of people.
I'm sure out there in my audience, there's going to be students who look at your career and say, wow, that's cool. He's got the best job in the world, especially for those people they've always wanted to be an athlete. But there's got to be some challenges and difficulties in any career. And so could you kind of openly talk about some of them that you have to deal with that someone may not think about?
Oh, I mean, a huge challenge, which I think is inherent within the just broadly speaking, the endurance athletics world, is the fact that, frankly, I do a sport that's not very commercially viable. How often do you see a running event sell out a stadium? How often do you see tickets being sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars to a running event? That doesn't happen. So really, honestly, the contract structure and the way that money is allocated is brutal. You have the top people who are going to be competing for Olympic gold medals, usually making high to mid six figures. On top of that, they have endorsement deals. So they can be very, very wealthy. But if you're someone who's, kind of around my level where you're probably not going to be winning any Olympic gold medals, you can get a contract, of course, but a lot of the income is then going to come through either sponsorships or being an influencer or race bonuses or trying to win individual race purses. So this source of income is not nearly as robust as it is within most sports. I always joked that I always wish that my mom were a little bit taller because then I could be an NBA center and make six figures instead of a runner who is not in the most commercially viable sport there is necessarily.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to talk open about that because, a lot of the times we can take our passions and our desires and put them into the marketplace and end up doing really well. But also there's also careers that where, there is limitations. And so I appreciate you openly talking about that. But at the same time, you're finding greater purpose into this running endeavor. And it sounds just amazing. And there's other ways, I would say too, for your type career, it's a lot of hustling outside of running, correct? That's going to have you have that income.
Increasingly so, especially with social media becoming more and more prevalent. There are actually a large category of people who are quote unquote really just influencer runners who, may not have the fastest times, but they have a really large following owing to their unique backstories or their unique content. And a lot of these quote unquote, Instagram runners can make more than a lot of people who are qualifying for USA Nationals or for even Pan Am Games teams and stuff. It is pretty incredible. There actually are having marathons now. Obviously not during COVID, but before COVID, where there were special categories where there's like an influencer category even, and it is pretty wild. And if you're really media savvy, you can make a really, really great career out of that. But you have to constantly be promoting products. You have to have unique and basically constantly updated content. You also, it's basically then going to be a full-time job where you're running all the time, but then you furthermore also curating content constantly as well. And that is definitely a growing opportunity, but it is one that you will see. I think this is anecdotal, but just to speak about the commercial non-viability of running, you see some guys who finished the top 50 at the Olympic trials for marathon who have less than 1,000 Instagram followers. So I think it's definitely a more anonymous type existence than if you were a basketball player or a baseball player or in another sport per se.
And so let's take you back for a minute. I want to take you back. I want to rewind your life into when you were in elementary school, could be third, fourth, or fifth grade. Was there a career you dreamed of doing when you grew up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Iowa. So this is going to be the most small town Iowa answer possible. So I had two dream careers simultaneously. And my first dream career is to be a race car driver. But my parents they wouldn't let me do that because first off, race cars are not inexpensive. And second off, they're it's too dangerous. So my other dream career was also super dangerous, which was to be a storm chaser. So those are my top two dream careers. And I'm not doing either, but I am still racing in a different fashion, although just in a much slower sense than being in a race car.
That's what I was going to say. I often encourage people to look back at their youth because sometimes we can find correlating patterns, and you joke about it, but it's really true. Both of those things you mentioned in your dream careers, you're racing, you're chasing something. And isn't it interesting that you have a career now where you're actually chasing a finish line? And so only at running wise. So I think that's pretty interesting. Um, so let's say somebody's out there and they're interested, but they don't know if they're good enough. How did you know you were good enough to do this?
Well, quite frankly, I really didn't. So, I mean, I ran D3 and I had a modestly successful college career. I won a few conference championships, was named the conference performer of the meet a couple of times. However, um, I actually never made nationals. So, I mean, most of these guys who are competing at this level are D1 All-Americans or childhood prodigy type people. Whereas my path is very interesting. So basically, I actually quit running for almost a whole year between undergrad, my start of grad school. And then basically by quit running, I mean, I still ran, but ran like 20, 30 miles a week, which for me is nothing. And just hiked and stayed active. But I realized that I missed the physical challenge of running. I missed the social aspect. I missed, that extra time out in nature. So I linked up with the team, and I was the slowest guy by PR, personal record, for basically every distance of the team I was training with. And I just, had the motivation and basically the will to do, the training they were doing, to put in the lifting, the stretching, the miles, the proper nutrition, and ended up ultimately hitting an Olympic trials qualifier time, which basically then is the level where you can then start to, really be training pretty seriously, and also, be respected generally within the running community as someone who's quote on, at that higher level. But it is funny because going into the race where I qualified, my times were not at that point. I actually ran a 3-minute personal best in the half marathon, in the first half marathon of the marathon, and then followed that up by still running a minute personal best in the next half. So it was really unexpected, but ever since, that's kind of been the foundation I've built, my training and based off of. And I think, it is sometimes hard to tell because sometimes you don't know if you're good enough, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of putting yourself out there and believing in yourself and seeing what you can do. Because running is a unique sport in the fact that there's a lot of people, there's even some examples of this where guys who didn't even run in college at all made the Olympic marathon trials. And it's because it's a unique sport in the way that you peak generally physiologically in running when you're in your early to mid to even late 30s, depending on who you are. So this gives people opportunity, if they haven't run before, but are still led a fairly healthy lifestyle. If they start, training in their early to mid 20s, it's not impossible to see them, make the trials, even if they've never run in college. So I think, it's definitely a really unique sport in that way. Insofar as that the prime age for a person is substantially higher than most other sports. For example, one of the guys who's going to be running in the U.S. Marathon Olympic team in 2021 in Tokyo is going to be 44 years old, which is pretty incredible when you consider the age limit for most sports.
Can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. And I think for many of us, running is a pain, but we do it as for an exercise, and you're actually doing it as a passion. The question that did come in, and I was kind of curious about it too, what does your training look like through the week? I mean, how many miles are you running? And other than running, how can you train for a sport like yours?
So it is pretty intensive, and it requires you to be fairly regimented. So I'm running at least 100 miles a week, generally speaking. And that's going to be kind of parsed out with a few important workouts. There's going to be a Sunday long run, which is going to consist of a run that's at least 20 miles. Usually it's longer than that. That's also going to include, generally speaking, one day of quote unquote faster work, which could involve a track session like mile repeats or 5K repeats or something like that. And then also another workout, which would be a quote unquote tempo session, which is running, 10 miles, 11, 12 miles at, your marathon pace or just above your marathon pace. And then basically running once or twice a day throughout the rest of the week. But that being said, I mean, if you parse it out, my average mileage per day is like 14 or more. It also requires eating a ridiculous amount of food. You do want to make sure that
that's okay. Your dog can talk for us too. No problem.
She's going to be loud. Yeah, she's loud, but I apologize for that. But you also have to eat a ton. So you have to. It's also a challenge because you have to eat healthy, but also not too healthy, because you also need to get the calories in, but you can't get them in by only eating like vegetables. So you have to have a very nutritionally dense diet that has a lot of protein, that has a lot of carbs, that has all of the big macro and micronutrients you need. You're also going to be lifting. A lot of my lifting, my upper body is pretty small, but at the same time, you're focusing mostly on legs, hips, hip flexors, glutes, hamstrings, calves. You are still working on your upper body as well, because you can't totally neglect that. But you're going to be lifting. You're also going to be stretching and doing other kinds of exercises throughout the week as well. In addition to that, you also need to get in a lot of sleep, because obviously running that much is pretty taxing on your body. So runners also generally sleep a lot more. And outside of that, I mean, there's a lot of external things too, like getting sports massages or other things that are required basically for well-being. So it is a whole boat of things aside from just going on those training runs that you have to really factor into your week in terms of scheduling, and also just in terms of
yeah, that's a pretty intense regimen that you go through. I don't think a lot of people think about everything you have to do as far as what you eat, strength training, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely not just get out of bed, go run, and then you can step into a marathon. So appreciate you being detailed and explaining that. Now, did you go to college? Did you major in anything? I think you said you run Division III, so you must have. Did you get your degree in anything?
Yeah, so I got dual degrees in economics and Chinese.
Oh, wow. Very, very interesting. And so did you kind of go into college not knowing what you wanted to do career wise, or did you kind of have your mindset on maybe this running idea?
I had no illusions that I was going to run. I mean, just to put that into scope, I think of the, couple hundred people who made the trials, fewer than I think, 20 were D3, and almost all of them were like D3 national champion type people. So, I had, no illusions of that whatsoever. This has been an unexpected, blessing, and I'm very, I enjoyed it a lot. But when I went to college, I wasn't quite sure I was going to major in. So I knew that I enjoyed economics. I knew that I kind of enjoyed the theoretical backings of it and thought it was fascinating. And thought, I took Chinese because I wanted to challenge myself, but also thought it could be pretty lucrative if I paired that with economics. But the more I learned about the economics and finance field, the more I learned that I didn't want to do that as a career. I was fascinated by it, but knew that that's not what I wanted to do. So I actually ultimately ended up going to grad school and ended up getting a master's in city planning with a focus on environmental planning.
Wow. Very interesting. So you went ahead and went on to get your degree. And, what a lot of people don't realize is that you kind of found your passion while you were at college. It might have been a different path than you had expected at the time, but that engagement of your mind and meeting other people, networking with people got you to where you kind of are today.
Definitely. And I mean, I think, had I, not in a way ended up going to grad school, I don't think I would have found that training group of people to connect with, who were, a bunch of, former or current trials qualifiers and other really high level marathon people. Had I not chosen that, I could have seen myself casually running, or even just stopping running entirely because I didn't, have any specific dreams or goals related to doing that as a career. But I think, through a very, winding path, my academic interests, and ultimately deciding to go to grad school, and then, situationally ending up in Salt Lake City, which is one of the running hubs of the US, ended up working out better than I could have ever hoped.
Awesome. Well, let's get to some of these questions. They look like more exercise in nature, but we'll take them as they come. No problem. We don't discriminate. So the first question that comes in says, how do you get interested in running? How would you motivate people just to start running to lose weight? Looks like somebody wants to just exercise, on their own. How would you do this running thing for them?
I mean, I think the important things in that are two. I think there's some. The first thing is to also, I think, just understand your history with running. So understand your experience level. Understand if you have run before. Have you been injured? If you've been injured, what has been injured? So to be self-aware of any issues that might come up, because physiologically, I'm a huge outlier. If I think my doctor said if my torso matched my legs, I'd be like 6'9", but if my legs matched my torso, I'd be like 5'4". So it allows me to run, pretty injury free, but that's not the case with the bulk of people I know. So I think, understanding what your injury history is, and then also working to either work on strengthening or flexibility with certain muscle groups, also making sure that you have adequate shoes. Like if you have, for example, plantar fasciitis or other foot problems, making sure that you have shoes that will meet your needs and will allow you to not be injured. I think also starting out really slow is something that's important, but being consistent. I think that, starting out slow and having measurable and attainable goals that you can check off and you can move forward on are important. I think also too, just establishing that routine is key. There's some days where run even sucks for me. So I get how that goes. So I think, just like holding yourself accountable to a routine is important. But then also something that's critical too is not, pushing through injuries, because that's only going to make things a lot worse. So example, if you get a stress fracture, don't try and keep running on it. Obviously you're going to take the medical precautions necessary. But I think, making sure I've talked to people who are starting to train for running. I think, running just a mile or two, even to start off with, or, running for a few minutes, walking for a few minutes. You don't have to do anything, insane, but I think it's just getting that ball rolling, establishing that consistency, knowing what your body needs, and also making sure that you have, really the only right equipment you need for running is making sure that you have a pair of shoes that are going to be correct and supportive for your stride, as well as any health issues that you may have.
And the next question comes in for a couple of questions here about the running. What has been your fastest mile, and what's the longest you've ever ran, and what time?
Okay, so my fastest mile is actually pretty slow for someone who's competing at marathon at my level. So my fastest mile is only, I believe that the conversion is like 4:17. So for guys who are competing at my level, a lot of times they're like 4:0 or even have broken 4 in the mile. So I'm quite a bit slower than a lot of those guys. But the longest I ran in one go was actually last October in an ultra marathon. I ran 86 miles in one go without stopping.
Okay, wait a minute. 4 minutes and 17 seconds? Yeah, folks, mine's about 9 minutes, so that should tell you everything that you need to know right there. The next question comes in is, how long do you plan on doing this for? They ask about, obviously you can't do this past a certain age. Is there any long-term career plans?
Yeah, so I think that I'm kind of inherently lucky in a way, because I do have a solid career history as well as that educational backing. I know some runners who, have only have had almost no career experience, maybe majored in like exercise science. So they're pretty much pigeonholed into doing running only. Where, I've had numerous full-time careers, and also I've had that education. So I think ideally I'd love to compete if I can stay healthy for the next 10 years or so. But that's obviously up to my body holding up, and me being mentally and physically still in the game. I would love to qualify for the next 2 Olympic marathon trials, maybe the next 3, depending on my health and my situation. But I think that within the next, I could peak anytime within the next really 4 to 10 years. So I would want to at least compete that long. But that being said, obviously, if my body has different ideas and I end up with some kind of corroding injury, I would obviously not be excited about it. But I think at the end of the day, I would still just be thankful to have had this opportunity and to make it as far as I have been able to. But I think, ideally hoping for like another decade if I can.
Adam, this has been really fascinating as far as the career library is concerned. It's also been very motivational and inspirational for people out there. You're doing it physically towards your career goal, and a lot of people are doing it mentally or different ways that to try to achieve their peak level in their career. And so you're doing that through physical things. And so I think it's very motivational, and I'm so happy you came on to share your incredible story. And how can people follow your journey? So, do you have social media, any websites, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think that the best way to do that would either to be to, generally speaking, would be to follow my own or my team's Instagram accounts. That is going to be, the team is going to be the San Diego Track Club Elite. And I think the handle for that Instagram is SDTC Elite. I believe, if not, searching San Diego Track Club Elite should bring that up. Furthermore, on my social media, you can follow my career-oriented journey on LinkedIn. However, I also have an Instagram, which is much more running focused, which is going to be just Adam Dalton, which is my name. I will be the guy who obviously runs and is located in San Diego. There are a few other Adam Daltons. It's not the most unique name, but thankfully there aren't too many.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to link and put them in the show notes for you guys. They'll look for them into the comments section when we get the video complete. You'll be able to click them and follow Adam there. Again, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you, and we wish you well.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here. I appreciate everyone for watching. I appreciate you for compiling this all. So thank